name is Kolabumi Adeko. I'm a project officer and the pen host at the PenPen African Residency program, the second edition, holding here in Kikuyu, close to Nairobi, Kenya. The PenPen Residency program is sponsored by the European Union alongside the organization called Culture at Work. It was sponsored to help African writers collaborate and write on the culture and the African identity. We started this program through a counterpart funding by the Culture at Work organization, and we had the first edition at Abuja, Nigeria in November 1 to November 22, and we had 6 participants from West Africa and Central Africa there. They would be providing half of the anthology that will be used for the African identity anthology that the PenPen Residency hopes to publish. For the East Africa edition, the second edition, which takes in Eastern and Southern Africans, we selected 1 person from 3 different countries and 3 persons from Kenya. The selection process was done because we wanted initially 2 persons from Kenya and 1 person from each country in the other Southern and Eastern African countries. But our Kenyan counterparts wrote very good and quality essays that were submitted to us, and we decided to go for quality over rationing. That is why we have 3 Kenyans here, 1 person from Rwanda, 1 person from Uganda, and 1 person from Zambia. And this completed the 6 persons we needed to complete an anthology of 12 authors, 6 from Western and Southern and Central Africa, 6 from Eastern and Southern Africa. This event is going to last 20 days. On the 21st day, which will be the closing ceremony, which will be holding at the Goethe Institute in town. We are on the 3rd day now, and the first day we welcomed our guests. The second day has been lectures, and now also more lectures. We've held lectures about culture. We are trying to immerse our writers in the cultural aspects of writing. They'll be having creative classes soon after, and then they can start work earnestly on their stories.
Jina langu ni Rachel Tunamjisha from Uganda. I'm a writer of children's literature, and it is through Writers Space Africa that I got to learn about PenPen Africa. There is a competition on the theme, the African identity, which I did write about, and fortunately I got to qualify.
My name is Okombo Dismas. I'm a writer, and I'm a poet, and I'm a reader. I learned about it through Writers Guild, an opportunity shared by Gabriel, and I wrote an essay on African identity, and fortunately I was among the selected to attend from Kenya.
When we were asking people to write non-fiction, especially non-fiction surrounding themselves, it's common for African writers to do poverty porn, but we were very happy to see that the entries that were submitted from Kenya and these persons that we selected were entries that brought out the holistic lives of Africans, and it allows one to see their lifestyle. We hope to then here teach them about culture and see how they can imbibe that into their writings.
There is a saying in Luganda, among the Baganda of Uganda, that says akaliba akendo or kalavida kumukonda. You'll tell what a person will be according to who or what they are as little children. If you wanted to make a man of a child, you'd have to groom them while they're still little.
Every community grows and then their tradition changes, but it is important that everyone has an identity. You should know who you are, and one of the things that situates who you are is the culture of where you come from. So we as Africans have noticed that we are not really proud of writing stuff that are African in nature. We don't even understand what the context of African is, and we have been very much influenced by other cultures that we almost have no voice of our own. But writing with our culture in mind helps the writer itself to find identity, and also the readership, they can say, yes, this is me in this story, this is me in that story. So we would appreciate a situation where our readers would be able to come along with the story, understand the nuance of the story. Then, as we have learnt in class, we have been avoiding the single story narration where somebody who is not us is telling the story of us. Now, these stories are going to be about us and are going to be by us.
With this information, I'll have to incorporate culture into my writing such that these children will know what to expect of society and how to behave in society. They'll know their values. They'll know how to behave in different societies according to a particular society's traditions and laws and norms. The stories that I do write for them are inspirations I drew from being with them. I write generally from my experiences as a child and from how I see them relate and what I know of society and traditions. I'm born in Western Uganda, but I grew up in the Central, and that helps me to know at least both cultures. So I'll write a story as according to what should be expected of children in the Central and what should be expected of children in the West, without necessarily bending so much to old traditions as such, but to what is happening now. Every story that I'll write, I'll have a lesson, maybe about friendship, maybe about greed, maybe about revenge, stuff like that.
In the recent past, I've shifted my focus to writing about Africa. The ideologies and the things I write about are basically to promote the Afrocentric idea. They surround the ideas of Ujamaa, Ubuntu, Arambe, the ideas of togetherness. And it's contrasted with the Eurocentric ideologies of capitalism and so forth. Afrocentrism is the realization that African ideologies were equally founded on the human urge to understand the world around them and to find meaning to life. So just like the Eurocentric ideas, which were once which evolved once from what some people call barbaric, because even in Germany and in England in the 18th century there were witch hunting, but they evolved. Even the African ancestors equally were driven by the urge to understand the world around them, and also to find meaning in life. I had a chance to meet Professor Ngugi when he was presenting his lecture on the history of the world, and I realized that there are several other Kenyans and other Africans who are equally interested in this area of study.
We are focusing on non-fiction. The reason is the story of Africa has been told is currently fiction. A lot of Western writers and also from other culture have written with the audience of their own people back home in mind. They have said things that are not untrue, or they have spinned narratives in such a way that they do not provide a very accurate version of who the African is, but a skewed version towards what they want their people to think the African is. So we are hoping that when our writers correct these narrations, we would be able to have a more holistic view of who we are, of what we represent, of the things that we could do or we do generally at home. Of course, since it's creative non-fiction, there's the element of infusing fiction into what really happened, but we want the characters to be real, to be genuine, and we want the events to be as much as possible based on true life events. Currently, Africa, the most of it is not as affluent as some other parts of the world, and because of that, the African is portrayed as a poor man or as a bad leader. We want to correct this narration. We want people to see that the African man is not just a case of bad leaders and poor followers. We want a case where they see human beings who live well-rounded life of joys, life of regrets, life of achievements, life of failures, and then, of course, people who lived before they died.
Yesterday we started our discussion on cultural practices, and we shared on cultural practices and everything. But the focus was really on how to tackle cultural practices in literature. Are they really important in literature? And the unanimous agreement was that they are important. So the question then which arose was, how should an African narrator in this 21st century go about writing about the African culture?
I said FGM. I said it was a barbaric culture, and I didn't get the reception I expected it to get.
We realized that the first thing the African narrator should do is to put the cultural practices into context, not just attacking them without doing research, but to put them in context.
Some of our culture have been portrayed as barbaric, and of course some culture really need them. They are outdated, they really need to change, and they need to come to terms with civilization. But yes, we want people to know out there that this culture came because of necessity, came because our forebears really thought about some things and chose that this is the best way to go about doing things because of the situation on ground. And we want the African to be proud of who they are, the stock they come from, the stock that they are going to give birth to, because that's very important. The future generation needs to know that there was a generation that stood up to tell the stories as they truly are, and that they themselves can be proud of who they are, of the Africanness of them, through the stories that their forebears, which will be us now, would have told.
It was such a challenge to me because I think I was very judgmental without basis. If I think it is not good, if I think it is not okay, I would call it ill or barbaric or anything. But from yesterday's class, I learned that I would have to study things.
One of the best African books for me, I would say that personally, is Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Now, if you read that book, you would leave the Igbo culture in it. You would see context. You would know why the main character, which is popularly known as Okonkwo, why he did what he did. Now, in context, a lot of African writers decide to write without them telling the nuances behind some certain actions or some certain traditions, and it makes the non-African reader, or in fact also the African reader, to really see Africans or our earlier forebears as persons who did not have reasoning skills, or who were very, very wicked, cruel, who lived lives that were based on selfishness or wickedness, who did not understand basic science or other related endeavors of life other than probably just killing each other. Now, the African writer should provide context, should see these people as holistic people who have reasons why they do what they did, and people who, though history has tried very much, as it is written, to wipe who they are out, who they are survives in who we are, and then we tell these stories so that the world may know that we are from human stock and we would give birth to human stock. The Western writers presently still hold sway. Their writings about who we are still dominate media, and sometimes when you try to change those narratives, the media says, oh, which writer do we feature now? We don't have people who tell the stories of here or who tell the story of there. Now, with more African writers coming to the fore, telling their stories, telling their localized stories, telling it as truthfully as possible, putting context into these stories, telling it as their fathers saw it, as their forefathers saw it, as their mothers saw it, as their grandmothers saw it, these stories help bring to the fore the correct narrative, of course, and then an African reading why we are where we are would feel proud of who they are, will feel proud of who they were, and will feel proud of who they are going to be. Of course, this would help increase the pride in being African, and then it would make one stand tall when anybody tries to bring you down.
When I go back home, I'll sit and study and have a background to what I maybe oppose or support. That was very useful to me.
There are Nigerian writers, there are Kenyan writers, there are Zambian writers, there are Tanzanian writers, and then there is the African writer. Before I can qualify to be an African writer, I must have experienced, whether personally or through induction, that's meeting with other writers, what Africa really looks like. I must have an holistic view of who Africa or what Africa truly is. Now, we are doing that here. That is why writers from different countries are brought here together to learn what it means to truly be African. Because African, like I said, is not just one thing. You can't sit in Nigeria and say, I am an African writer. No, you are a Nigerian writer because you do not really know what somebody in Kenya, what they experience, what somebody in Zambia, for example. So we want the African writer to be somebody who is traveled, whether physically or in mind, who has been to the different lives of people from different walks of Africa, and who has been able from this experience gleaned to portray a true view of what it means to be African. Yes, our residents have been very cooperative, very willing to learn, and in the few days I've been here, I've interacted with them so much, have learned, they've learned, and there's one person, his name is Dismas, he's from Kenya. He's very interactive, and while we're in class or while we at dinner, at lunch, he's always coming up with questions. He's like, tell me about Biafra, tell me about here, tell me about there. And I saw his blog recently, and he encompassed all we've been learning so far and what has been happening here, and the way he writes them so beautifully, like one could almost live in the residence with us just reading what he has wrote.
So far, the experience has been awesome and challenging intellectually, because I've met several people from Rwanda, from Zambia, from Uganda, and we've shared on cultures and different point of view, which has been really challenging and also interesting to learn about, and connecting with other people has really shaped how I view other people.
Our writers would need to learn how to publish, how to approach publishers, or how to self-publish. Now we'll be having a class on publishing. Of course, before that class, it is important that they learn also how to edit, or which editor to give their jobs out to, so that they can have the best quality manuscripts before they publish. So there will also be a class on editing. So our writers are expected that they would gain more about culture. They are already creative writers, but they would learn more about how to become more creative in their writing, especially when they are writing non-fiction. Then also they would learn to edit their work, or how to find good editors who would ensure that their work is well polished. Then of course, the big bane for African writers is getting publishers. So we would teach them the art of self-publishing if they wish to go down that route. At the same time, we'll teach them the art of getting very established publishers and how to ensure that the contract do not stiff them at the end of the day. So I'm looking forward to somebody here too, or maybe all 6 of them, because that would be the ultimate joy, telling us that we became better writers, far better writers, probably renowned in their location, maybe their cities, their country, or across Africa as a very, very good writer because they've learned something from this residency.